All right, guys, welcome to today's edition of Youtini Tuesday. It's a very special edition, so I want to welcome everyone. This is our very first roundtable discussion. Today, we're going to be talking about Thrawn alliances, which I know a lot of y'all got in your last Youtini shipment. So we're excited to do that today. First thing I want to do is just go around and let everyone introduce themselves who has not made it on Youtini Tuesday yet. So we should probably start with CEO and founder. Corey, why don't you go for it?
Sure, absolutely. Well, I'm Corey Helton. I am CEO and founder of the wonderful and illustrious Youtini. I'm happy to be here.
All right, great. Heather, how about you?
Hi, I'm Heather. So I manage social media and email marketing, and I'm super excited to be a part of this.
Yeah, and you guys might recognize her from some previous Youtini Tuesdays as well. Kate, you're up.
Hey, I'm Kate, wife to Corey over there. I work with logistics for Youtini.
Awesome. All right, and Rick, take us home.
Hi, hello, I'm Rick. I'm on the leadership team with Youtini, and I create the magazine in your subscription box every month.
And does a great job with it at that. And guys, my name is Charles. You may or may not know me from previous Youtini Tuesdays. If it's your first time here, welcome. I do want you to know this is going to be very, very spoiler heavy. So if you have not finished Thrawn Alliances yet, get out of here. Come back later. This will be up on Facebook for forever. So you can always come back. But now we're going to go ahead and jump right in. If you're here and you're watching, throw up some comments and we'll see if we can get to those as well. All right. So first thing I want to do is kind of just go around and guys, don't explain why yet, but give me your rating of Thrawn Alliances on a 1 to 10. No explanation. Let's go in the same order that you guys introduce yourselves.
Okay, I think I will give Thrawn a 7.5.
Oh, that's kind of generous. I will give Thrawn Alliances a 6.
I was stuck between a 6 and a 7.
I'm at a firm 7.
Okay. All right. And I'm gonna agree with Heather. I'm gonna give it a 6. Um, that's just my take on it. But it sounds like we're all kind of in the same boat. Maybe not super thrilled with it, but we enjoyed the ride. And I do want to say that we always really like to stay positive in our Facebook group, but that doesn't mean that we can't not enjoy something as much as other things. So you may hear us saying things that we don't like tonight, but that doesn't mean we're going to be overly derogatory or hating on it or anything like that. We're just going to be upfront and honest, and we want to hear y'all's honest opinions as well. So let's go ahead and jump right in. A couple of things that I wanted to talk about was sort of the structure of this book, right? Because we've had several books recently that have been working with multiple timelines. Last Shot was kind of the first time that we jumped around a whole lot, but this story did it as well with our Clone Wars and our Empire eras. What are y'all's thoughts on that? Did that work for this book as opposed to past books like Last Shot? Did it bring anything to the table that you thought helped a lot for the story? Rick, let's start with you.
In general, in any kind of storytelling, I'm not a huge fan of timeline hopping. I think it can often serve as a distraction. I think it especially did at the tail end of Last Shot. I know we're not here to discuss Last Shot, but that was a pretty egregious example for me. The timeline hopping in Alliances was not a huge problem for me. I thought that Tim Zahn was really clever about how he employed it. I mean, he would even marry up distinct parts of one timeline into the other, where a character would repeat a line from chapter to chapter, and I love that stuff. I mean, it may be super clever or winky, but I liked it. The only thing for me about the timeline hopping is the quality of one timeline versus the other becomes very obvious, and I longed for the prequel era stuff more as we went on. So I became less interested in the present timeline, I guess, this time went on. But it didn't bother me much as a storytelling device this time.
Yeah, the interesting, I would say, interesting thought about sort of the timeline hopping that's sort of unique to this book is because it's sort of because it is the same characters. It almost well, because it's the same characters, but they're different characters because it's not Vader, it's Anakin, and it's not Thrawn. Like it's like really really young Thrawn. So like they almost seem like completely distinct characters. So even though there's like sort of two main characters, it really felt more like four main characters. So in a way, I can definitely see what you mean by that. And like it almost didn't feel like actual timeline hopping to some degree because they were such radically different stories and different characters.
Especially in the case of Vader, because his absolute denial of
Yes.
his previous self, he
Yes.
never even referred to himself in the past. So the disconnect was good for that, and that made for a lot of really meaty storytelling. Like, it was very interesting for that reason, because each of them was hiding something from not only the person in the room, but a version of themselves in the past, and each had knowledge that had nothing to do with what they were doing, but informed the decisions they were making. So it was very complicated. A lot of content there that I liked.
Sure. Heather, Kate, you guys have anything with that?
I actually really liked the timeline hopping. I liked it in Last Shot, but I liked it in Thrawn Alliances. It just kind of added a layer of, like Rick said, you kind of want to go back to that prequel era and learn more about those characters, but I liked it.
Yeah, honestly, I didn't like it in Last Shot, so when I heard they were planning on doing a time jumping thing with Thrawn Alliances, I was a little skeptical at first, but I really do think Timothy Zahn he pulled it off. But I, like with Rick, I found myself liking the Clone Wars era content more than the present day content. But I did like how you could see like the immediate connections between the two. You really did need both of those timelines to understand some parts of what was going on.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it served this story a lot better than we've seen in previous cases. Now, something else that we saw in this book that has been done before, but maybe not exactly like this, was sort of narrated Force premonition, right? So oftentimes we would see Anakin deflecting blaster bolts, and just before doing it, it would actually be narrated out where the shots would be going. So at head, at chest, at chest, at chest. If there was ever like 3 in a row, I would find myself kind of laughing a little bit. But what did you guys think of that? Are you a fan of seeing Force premonitions kind of boiled down to that? Do you want it to kind of be more of a mystery? Corey, I know you have something to say on this.
Yeah, I was not a fan of that at all. That really drove me nuts. It felt a little cringy, to be honest, is the word I would choose. Like, I don't know. I mean, this is kind of synonymous to me as midichlorians, right? So like the Force doesn't really need to be explained, in my opinion, right? Like the Force is the Force. It's the thing that connects all living beings, yada yada yada. You know, I don't feel like it really needs to be defined. I understand what they were kind of going for with the. I understand what Zahn was going for with that sort of narrative thing, but he's never done that before, and he's written quite a few Star Wars books at this point, and that was new. It was sort of awkward. I was not a big fan of that, I'll be honest.
Yeah. Other thoughts on that?
Seeing how Anakin perceives the threats against him does demystify the power that a Jedi has to, preconceive things and make these fantastic feats of physicality. But I feel like it was a unifying thing because, Corey says Zahn's never done that before, but he did do it in Thrawn. And I remember in that book, from Thrawn's perspective, where he would extrapolate everything that he thought, I found that to be demystifying for Thrawn. Having read so much Thrawn, I felt very comfortable with his knowing everything.
Sure.
But for me, in a story architecture kind of way, it does marry them together, and it does create a similarity. But it is a device for Thrawn. It's way more interesting than for Anakin. I mean, just the sort of like,
the Sherlock Holmes. It feels Sherlock Holmesy for Thrawn,
like
but it didn't feel like that way for Anakin.
Discombobulate. Remember that
Well,
movie?
the thing is, I think it's that you can respect what Thrawn is doing, right? Because you can follow his logic to come to a conclusion, and it makes sense. Whereas with just knowing where something is going to happen, I don't need to be told that Anakin knows that a shot is coming here or there. Like, I already know that he's able to do that, and it's not something you can necessarily follow. Like I'm not relating. If a tennis ball is coming at my face, like, yeah, I would try to block it too, but it didn't kind of land the same way for me.
Right. I mean, is that how that works? Is this a canon explanation for how Jedi deflect blaster bolts? Do they like
Technically,
see
yes.
the future for a half second? I mean, is that how that works?
Technically,
It
because
is
it's all
now.
canon.
Yeah, I know, and I'm like, is that a good thing? I'm not sure.
I don't think we'll see other authors adopting it.
Sure.
I think Tim Zahn gets to be in his own little playground, and that's where he
Oh,
gets
yeah.
to stay. They probably give him a wide berth, but
Sure.
I mean, it wasn't that prevalent, was it? I felt
I
like
mean,
it
it was
stuck out when I
every
read it, but it
time
happened a
Anakin was
lot.
in combat, pretty much.
It was a bit overdone, yeah. And my reason for not liking it was it seemed to disrupt the writing itself. Like, instead of saying the premonition, oh, coming at head, coming at chest. I mean, I really just needed that the first time. The first time I read that, I thought, oh, how neat. But after that, he could just say, okay, he used his lightsaber to block a shot at the head and chest. You don't need the premonition every single time.
I agree with
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, I could see that actually. One time would have been enough. Kate, thumbs up or thumbs down on Forced Premonitions?
I think it was different for me because I listened to the audiobook, so I wasn't reading it like at head. It was like actually talking. He was actually saying it, so it put me in that zone of like being in his head. But
Interesting. That's a good point.
yeah,
I probably would have
you actually might.
appreciated it more that way.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It would be more like Sherlock Holmes because like him, like even in the new Sherlock Holmes films with Robert Downey Jr., like the way that it literally walks through like what's going to happen. Those are some of the literally the best additions to those films. And if that's what he was going for, then kudos to him. But it didn't. I don't know. It didn't do it justice reading it. Maybe audiobook would have been different, which is very common in a lot of Star Wars books. I'll add.
If anyone could sell it, though, Mark Thompson could. I assume.
Yeah. Sure.
He could do anything.
Yeah, so Kate, you should actually probably have a pretty unique perspective because no one else listened to the audiobook. Is that right? Everyone else read the physical copy? All right, awesome. Now, you mentioned something, Corey, about how is this canon now? And that kind of brings me to my next point. Vader referring to Anakin as the Jedi.
Oh, yeah.
That, I would assume, is now. I mean, does that mean moving forward when we're in Vader's head and he's thinking about Anakin, will he forever now say the Jedi? Because that's not even necessarily in line with what has happened in, say, the Vader comic series. So I thought that was a really interesting choice. What are y'all's thoughts on that? Heather, how about you first this time?
I actually didn't put a lot of thought into that, so maybe if someone else has a thought on that.
Sure.
Yeah, this sort of raises the question, which is important to sort of discuss, which we at Youtini have not really discussed this very much in general, which would be a fantastic discussion, almost entirely of itself. Is the sort of nature of canon? Is like, I think the first question I always ask when we're asking a question is XYZ canon? Is does it matter? Like, it's really an important question to address because in reality, like the line that is canon is kind of a fine line, and it's almost not worth just debating over what is canon versus what is not canon when it comes to the details like that. But in general, I thought it was fine. Is it canon that Darth Vader refers to Anakin as the Jedi? I don't know. You're right. He didn't do it in the comics, so I don't know. Does it matter? I mean, maybe it's. I didn't really read it as Darth Vader understands Anakin to be the Jedi as much as I understood it to be as as a sort of narrative point to try to push the fact that Anakin and Darth Vader are almost two completely different people. That's how I interpreted it anyway.
Interesting. I almost saw it as like a psychological, just
exactly.
He won't accept the fact that was also him is kind of how I was taking it, is interesting.
Sure.
It's just something we've never seen before.
I actually thought that was a powerful narrative device because the disassociation that Vader had, how Vader has disassociated himself from Anakin, and it's his the illusion he's created for himself too, because Vader is so wrong. Like, Vader's very existence is wrong. He's sort of like this rebirthed hell demon version of Anakin Skywalker, and I like that Vader is so deluded by his own existence that he's disassociated completely from Anakin. Like,
Yeah.
whatever he went through after choking Padme and ultimately learning that she died, I feel like, what else could you do? I mean, he killed a bunch of kids. He murdered all the Jedi. He killed his wife. He tried to kill, by the time he became Vader, I like the idea that he's so thoroughly disgusted and unable to think of himself in the past that he has to call it the Jedi.
Sure.
Maybe it also helps him maintain the lie too, because there's several great moments in the book where where Thrawn and Vader tiptoe around each other about who knows what about whom, and there's some, like, I believe, edge of your seat moments in the book too.
Absolutely.
I hope we get to talk about.
Yeah, honestly, personally, that's a comment I was kind of looking forward to making. Is I would have loved to see that pushed a little further. Actually, like the sort of debate between Thrawn and Vader. I mean, honestly, I felt like Thrawn kind of made Vader look kind of bad in this book, like almost weak in a way, which is not how I perceive Vader at all. So I would have loved to see. We had lots of scenes in there where Vader would, like, he would think about maybe choking Thrawn. I wish he would have done it just once, like just put him in his place one time, like maybe not even a big deal, but just sort of like he did with Director Krennic in Rogue One, where he was like, careful not to choke on your aspirations. I would have loved to see something like that.
Instead, like, the most he did was just, like, reach for his lightsaber.
He touched his
"Let far
lightsaber.
crack
Yeah.
out of you, and you're gonna get it."
I know, and it's by the end of the book, I was just sort of like rolling my eyes at it because I was like, "Come on, man, do something, bro."
And
Yeah.
the argument that they always came to always revolved around the same thing about, like, trust, and even Thrawn was like, "We had this discussion already." It kind of just seemed to repeat itself.
Yeah, he did actually have that line at one point, and I was like, "Thank you." That's what I was thinking. Like,
Yeah.
we've been here
Somebody
before.
gets
Right.
it.
And now you raise a good point, which is something that I did want to talk about. This is Grand Admiral Thrawn, so arguably the best villain to come out of Legends, right? And Darth Vader, so the original, just the original bad guy, right? So when you bring two characters together like this, two alphas, right, into all of these scenes, and previously everything that we had seen with them, they're always the character that is on top. When you bring them together, I think you do run a risk of diminishing one or the other, or potentially both. And so I want to see, what do you guys think about that? Did you come out seeing a winner between the two? And if so, who? And if not, then what did you think? Did that diminish the characters at all? Whoever can jump in on this.
I'd say Thrawn definitely came out as the winner in this book, and it only makes sense. I mean, it is titled after him. But yeah, kind of like what Corey was saying, Vader, they didn't really do him much justice in this book. Thrawn definitely topped him every which way, and even at the end of the Clone Wars timeline, Anakin screwed up big time, even though Thrawn told him, like, "Hey, this is a really bad idea." So I kind of think that in both timelines, Thrawn was always a step ahead and knew what was going to happen.
Yeah, for me, I don't know if the characters were diminished. I mean, I wish I would have given this more dedicated pre-thought, but Charles raises a good point that when you do put them together, it breeds a risky situation, because Vader is always put up against people who are far less powerful than he is. He's always choking somebody, cutting somebody in half, or breaking something. He's a force of nature, and the Thrawn is a force of, like, mind and willpower. So you put those two together. I mean, Vader doesn't have much to do on a Thrawn adventure but be pissed off at Thrawn. Like, the amount of times that I thought, okay, Vader would have choked him. If this were anybody other than Thrawn, he would have been choked.
Yeah.
Choked or slashed or thrown out an airlock.
Yeah, which is really interesting, actually, because it sort of brings up a little bit that I wish would have been explored a little bit more in the book, which has honestly not been explored super well in general, which in the EU, which would be a great place to see another book on, is sort of the dynamic between Palpatine and Vader. Like Vader never actually knows if he is actually Palpatine's right-hand man, Like, that sort of question of maybe Thrawn is that person in a lot of ways, and how that really just seemed to drive him insane is a very interesting dynamic, and a textbook Sith tactic to, like, not let the apprentice actually know all your tricks, right? So I thought that was really cool.
In the first Vader comic that Kieran Gillen did with LaRocca, there is this great scene where after Vader, he's demoted because of the destruction of the Death Star, and he goes on this adventure to, I forget now, I read it so long ago, but essentially he uncovers all of his potential replacements. And the Emperor doesn't exactly know how much Vader knows about it, but there's this great scene where Vader says, I understand my place and I understand us very well. And Vader, that for me was like the catalyst moment where Vader realizes, okay, I'm going to try to get my son to come back and boot Vader out. So at some point, Vader in the comics does get an idea of his place, but that's not necessarily reflected in the books. It's going back to the canonicity question. It's like, it's already a little destabilized like it used to be, which is why it's like, who cares? Just take what you like and just enjoy it as it comes. But definitely in this, you have Vader constantly questioning, like, well, I'm the right-hand man. Is Thrawn the right-hand man? Well, I probably shouldn't stab him right now because he's really important.
Yeah.
You never get any interior monologue from Thrawn about that, where it's like, well, I can't piss off Vader because the Emperor might be mad at me. Thrawn just does what he wants anyway.
Right. It's very interesting.
So I guess to answer your question, Charles, Vader definitely loses. He comes off as neutered. Because the story robs him of anything he would do normally, which is all the killing and the exploding and the.
Agreed as well. And I think it would have been actually really powerful had he even just force choked Thrawn, like even just not killed him, but just
for a second,
did something to him,
Or maybe even Thrawn just like felt his collar be a little tight or something. Like
that would have been really cool.
I agree.
And I think the other interesting thing is that it didn't seem like Vader wasn't doing that out of respect for Thrawn. Maybe until the more of the final chapters, it felt like he wasn't doing it out of fear of the Emperor, because the Emperor needed Thrawn for whatever his machinations are. It didn't feel like it was a respect thing, which kind of surprised me, but also shows how powerful Palpatine's influence is. So let's kind of switch gears a little bit from Vader and Thrawn, and let's talk about one other character who played a really big part in this book that I didn't necessarily know she was going to until they started posting the excerpts on StarWars.com. So Padme played really a pretty big role in this, at least the Clone Wars era part of this story. What did you guys think of Padme's part? Did you like what she brought to the story, and what did you feel like she brought to the story? What are you guys' thoughts on that? Kate, how about you? You haven't chimed in a little bit.
Yeah, so I don't know if I was influenced because I did listen to the audiobook, but I didn't really care for Padme's role in this book. I thought it was kind of a side story in a way. Like it was the main plot, but she just, for some reason, she didn't seem like Padme. She just seemed like a tool to use to keep the plot going.
Yeah, and that was a weird sort of forced way to make them all end up on that planet. Like this weird side character that none of us really know about, like sent her a message. Yeah. She sent her a message, and I'm not really, now that I'm thinking about it, what was the message exactly? Was it?
I think it was just that something was going on.
But what is that? What does that mean? I mean, it's a big galaxy. There's always something going on. Like,
was it Duja? Did she suspect the droid factory or the Cortosis, whatever was happening?
Oh yeah, maybe that was it. I don't know. She couldn't have sent her an encrypted message or something.
This book is considerably shorter than Thrawn. I think by almost 100 pages. And I did a count of the Padme pages before her plot merges with Anakin's, and it's like 1/6 of the book, where she's like traipsing through rivers and meeting characters we never see again. And I feel like there was this intention on Zahn's part to show her as powerful on her own, and she has agency and capability and gets out of these scrapes herself. But and that's good. And I think books like this do need more of that, and I would love to see Padme more often, because she's a favorite of mine as a prequel kid that I am. But it only served to distract from the plot. When I was reading through, I'd get to the tail end of some amazing scene on the Chimera, and it'd be Padme like bartering her necklace for sleeping and stuff. And it's 20 pages. It's a lot of time where no other part of the story lasts 20 pages. And then later on, it's 15 pages. And I thought it's a huge amount of the book that is completely unrelated to the plot. All it does is serve to put her in the same prison cells that Thrawn and Anakin end up in. Sure. I know they wanted to avoid her being a damsel in distress, but you could have just had her on Mokij from the get.
Sure.
And then have them find her there. And then, but
right.
I don't know. It was distracting, and it pulled me out of the story, and I found myself sort of skimming through the Padme stuff until, of course, the scene with the lightsaber flying around. She knows that Anakin is finally there at the factory. I was like, okay. And then when it all merges, it's fine. But getting there was kind of a chore, and I feel like it robs most of her appearances in the book with any meaning. Like ultimately, it's like, okay, it's kind of a labor to get here, and okay, so she can hike and barter. And that felt out of character for her.
I know she's kind of
action oriented.
She's pretty BA. I mean, she can fight and stuff. So I mean,
yeah,
I know. Yeah, I totally agree. And I don't know.
I wasn't expecting her to be on her heels so much. That kind of bothered me.
Yeah. And it didn't feel unlike something that we would have seen in, say, a Clone Wars episode or, a 3-episode arc. But I felt like kind of what you're saying, Rick, is that maybe that's not what we need to take up that much real estate in a book of this size. One thing that I do think that she brought to the table, which really didn't present itself until the end, was sort of the idea that the Republic was doing exactly what the Separatists were doing to different worlds around the galaxy, right? Lebjaw kind of made the point that it was the Republic and the people that she brought to the world that were destroying Mokij and the factory where all of these people had jobs, etc. And so she kind of had to confront that idea. I don't know that she successfully formed a reaction to it or necessarily a good defense to that idea when it was presented to her. But what did you guys think about that? Do you view the Republic as really the same thing? Do you think that that's something that, Padme needs to reconcile? What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, I would at least say that the whole premise of the Clone Wars, I mean, the older I get and the more times I watch through the Clone Wars and read books about the Clone Wars and read books about Palpatine, the more that I fully believe that Palpatine really was a freaking genius, because the Clone Wars and the Republic, I mean, the Republic really did have some serious issues. I mean, there were some really major issues, and it's really impossible to deny. And I think that everybody sort of knows that they might not be on the right side to some degree. Like, Anakin asked that question multiple times, Padme asked that question multiple times. Anakin is this sort of weird black and white, diehard, philosophical character to some degree, but like, it's always a good question: is are they on the right side? And I feel like all the people with any real loyalty are answering that honestly, like Padme does. And I don't know, it's a good question. I mean, there's the whole arc at the very end of the book where Anakin like sort of destroys the whole planet or whatever. He didn't destroy the whole planet, right? He just blew up like the city or something, I think, right?
Like the main part of the planet, I think.
Yeah.
He made like a volcanic geyser that basically spread over civilization.
Yeah, and how about his ability to totally rationalize that too, right? It's like, yeah, it was for the greater good. Like, I mean, dang, bro, he just murdered all those people.
People want to rationalize a lot of things.
That's true.
I gotta kill these kids.
Right.
I mean, I love
my
wife.
That wasn't Vader. That was the Jedi.
Wait, was it? No, he was technically Vader at that point. He just didn't have a helmet yet.
Charles, you bring up a really good point, and it has me thinking that the Republic and the Separatists are no different, because the villain at the top is the same person whose goals are to have supreme power. He's essentially disinterested in the war. He's disinterested in the Separatists or the Republic winning. He just wants to control all of it. That's like his goal is the Sith. So
he's playing chess against himself at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Well, it's like it's him and also him versus the galaxy. They just don't know it. He's way above them, like saying good, and they're just all warring. And at the end, he's at the top, and he thinks he'll remain there. So yeah, the disillusionment here is terrible, actually. I thought I knew who the good guys were, Charles. But no, they don't know. I mean, I guess the bad guys aren't even really bad guys, and the good guys aren't even good guys. It's just Palpatine is
Right.
the bad guy.
Right. Like, is the separatist movement in general, like, is it a bad movement? I mean, like, it's not really like the Confederacy and the Union and the American Civil War. I mean, this is it's not on some fundamental evil principle like slavery is a key part. It's just that they wanted to leave and wanted planets to join them, and I don't know. It doesn't really seem like a bad idea.
Yeah, a destabilization that Palpatine himself was causing.
Exactly.
It was just about the Sith becoming a true power.
Sure.
He wanted to destroy his enemies and rule the galaxy, and he won for a while.
It's true.
23 years. He had a 23-year run, and it was down the garbage chute with you.
And long enough it was, right?
Yeah.
So I think one particular, you guys said so many things that are kind of just making me want to go off on so many tangents. But one thing that was really interesting that Padme said that kind of played into the whole ending where Anakin essentially destroyed Mokij was when she was referring to how she'd basically seen Anakin like this before. Like she tells Thrawn, "Don't try and reason with him. I've seen him like this before." It's on around page 330. I'm using my notes here. And a quote that I pulled says, Padme shook her head, her thoughts flashing back to that terrible day, that terrible frozen moment when Anakin had confessed his slaughter of the Sand People. He won't listen to me, she said, blinking back tears. I thought that, I see you guys looking in your books. I thought it was really powerful because it showed that kind of, unlike Anakin, right? Anakin rationalizes all these awful things that he's done really up to this point, which does not yet include killing all the younglings, etc. It looks like Padme really has not rationalized that. She hasn't found a way to say that's okay. It sounds like she's actually pretty disturbed by what she knows he's done. I mean, blinking back tears just thinking about it. And after that, she witnesses him destroy this planet, or at least a part of this planet. I mean, do you guys think she knew where all of this was headed? Maybe more so than we initially thought.
In headed, do you mean the plan for Mokij or his ultimate fall?
I mean, more of Anakin's ultimate fate. Yeah.
I think when you love somebody dearly and you know them well, whether or not you want to admit it, you know the darkness that lies in them. I mean, I can't think that Padme was blindsided by Anakin's ultimate turn, because she, at the birth of their romance, he murdered an entire village of people. She's like, it's okay, you're human.
You hate it when that happens.
Yeah.
I mean, as a married man, I've wanted to murder entire villages, I guess, because I don't know, it's weird. It's one of those things that the books have to make sense of that maybe didn't make sense in the movie, but if we're taking it as fact and that's how it is, no. To answer your question directly, I think Padme might have seen it coming and lived in denial of it.
Sure.
I mean, in denial that makes sense too, because she's Prego with his kids. He's the hero of the Republic. Like, so much of her world, he became the pillars of it.
Right.
The Republic being a positive and a power is because of him and Obi-Wan Kenobi, really. And she has children, and I imagine for any woman having children, the world becomes tremendously different. So, I mean, even up to the point where she knew what Anakin had done on Mustafar. She's like, hey, you could still be good, right? He's like, no, she's trying, but she knew full well when she went to Mustafar what he was. So yeah, love's pretty powerful, even if it's ignorant.
Sure. Heather, what thoughts do you have on that? Do you think Padme, had she rationalized it? Do you think she hadn't? Where did she see this going in your mind?
Well, I definitely don't think she would have been able to call all the tragedies that happened in Revenge of the Sith. I think you would, even Force sensitives couldn't predict that. I don't think so. I don't expect her to. But to me, she kind of seems like someone who's just trying to justify a bad relationship. Like,
that's a good point.
Yeah, they know deep down, like they're in some shit. And excuse me, but
but
no,
really though,
he's good, you know.
True.
Just
It's
he
true.
treats
It's
me
just
nice. I
basic
promise.
principle stuff.
That's kind of what I get from it, and it's really sad because she's an awesome lady. She doesn't deserve all that.
She is. She is an awesome lady. Did this make you guys look forward more to Queen Shadow that we have coming out next
Oh,
year?
yeah.
100%.
Oh yeah, I'm really excited to see Padme in a standalone thing, regardless of who writes it or like anything. Just because like some of the Padme stuff in the Clone Wars is frustrating to some degree, but most of it is. I mean, it's hard to not look at Padme and be like, this is one of the most rational characters in the entire prequel era. Like it really is, and so I mean, I'm excited by that for sure.
I really couldn't stand the Clovis episodes.
Oh
and
my
all-
god. We can't talk about the Clovis episodes from Youtini.
Okay. Besides that, yeah, I think Thrawn Alliances, I mean, her parts, I mean, she is clearly very smart. She holds herself up very well, and I'm excited to see that in Queen Shadow. I'm hoping that even if it's not by the same person, that it's E.K. Johnston, right? Who's
Yeah.
writing that one.
What has E.K. Johnson written? Did they write Kenobi?
Ahsoka.
No,
Ahsoka.
Ahsoka. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
right, Ahsoka.
Yeah, so I'm hoping that, E.K. Johnston will, take notes from this novel in creating Padme because she's written very well in this book, even though it's not called Padme Alliances, but it happened regardless.
Sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Kate, looking forward to Padme. Did you like what you got in this book? Are you looking forward to more?
I did. I think it, because to go off of the question that you asked previously, like I think this book helped develop her character. To me, she's a lot more mature than we give her credit for because yes, she is in a terrible relationship, but like, how do you change someone else's motivations? But
Caitlin's
I
a
would
therapist,
love,
everyone.
yeah, so change, theory of change. Anyways, yes, I would love to read more about Padme and maybe even her beginnings as a queen.
Absolutely.
There have been very few details released about that. They say because you're elected when you're really young, like when you're 9 years old, and you serve a term, that you can be a senator. And
that way, yeah, that's such a crazy story in general. Like, if they elaborate on any of that at all, like, who in their right mind elects a 9-year-old? Like, seriously, they must have been like a genius 9-year-old.
There's going to be a backstory where Jar Jar Binks was the guy working the polls and accidentally.
Oh my gosh.
Boss Nass says in The Phantom Menace, and I can't believe I got this callback so ready on hand, but he's like, Yusa da Nabooan, thinking your brains are so big.
I'm so impressed.
They are like genius level people up on the surface of that planet running things.
That's true. They did make Palpatine, so.
And we are now going to play a mini game of how many Boss Nass quotes can y'all slip into your answers to these songs.
Oh my gosh.
Now you guys brought up another good point about having these villains. I think it was you, Rick. You said something like, "Who are the heroes? Who are the villains? Who's on the right side?" Essentially, right? What do you guys think about having villains or those who are presented as villains as basically the protagonists in the books? Do you guys like getting these books that are written from the villain perspective?
Absolutely love it.
Yeah. What do you think that brings to the table?
I think it really depends on where it's coming from and what type of villain we see. I tell you, I do not really like to see villains like seeking power for the sake of it, for seeking power. I really liked the Plagueis book. I really love the Darth Bane trilogy, and Tarkin is one of my favorite novels from the new canon stuff. And like hearing people talk about rising to power on a philosophical level is one of my favorite things. And Thrawn almost doesn't really fit into that category to some degree because he has this weird sort of other motive going, which is sort of odd. Which I
still don't fully understand.
Yeah. I don't know. Does he understand it fully after this book? I'm not really sure if he even knows what side he's on. That was a weird little ending. We should talk about that at some point.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's
Kate,
funny
would you like?
Sorry.
Oh, I was just gonna say, Kate, would you like to comment on Corey loving to read into people's inner monologues about rising to power? And is there any analogy we can draw to Youtini as a company? Sorry to cut you off. Go ahead with what you were saying.
No.
I'm just laughing because Corey just listed all the books listed by the same author. So
Oh yeah, James Luceno is my favorite author.
Yeah.
That's not really a secret around here.
Mhm.
I don't know. There's something about his reading, which is funny because Caitlin sort of is opposite of me. So Caitlin has read far less books than I have. Obviously, she got into them about a year ago when we started giving some thought to maybe starting Youtini, and she listens to all the audiobooks as she sort of already listed, which is a whole other sort of journey in and of itself. But some of the books that I've recommended her read from Luceno have not been her favorites, such as Catalyst and Plagueis, which is actually a pretty common complaint amongst folks that are fairly new to the books. Is like if they start with Tarkin or Catalyst, they will never read another Star Wars book, which is why I never recommend they start with those.
No, those books are really rewarding if you've consumed a lot of other material and know the movies really well, because what Luceno does better than anybody, at least where Legends is concerned, he hasn't really done this much in canon, is he weaves everything together.
Oh yeah,
he makes everything fit, and his writing style, like his prose, is way more literary than any other.
Oh yeah,
maybe Zahn, but I mean, just his choice of words, how he phrases things. I mean, like if you look at some of his pages, like the blocks of text, the paragraphs are like the entire page. He does not care if you can keep up or not. He doesn't care that it's a Star Wars novel. So, I mean, telling someone to start with Darth Plagueis is like throwing them off of a cliff without
right. Yeah,
Figure
for sure.
It's,
a funny story though, actually. Catalyst is Luceno, right? I think it is.
It is.
Yes, Catalyst is actually the number one owned book in all of the people that are using the Youtini bookshelf. Fun fact. I randomly did a total analysis of all the people using the bookshelf, and that book is owned more than any other book, and I have no idea why. I'm wondering if it's something to do with the big marketing campaign leading up to Rogue One. Maybe they pushed that book or something, because it was marketed as sort of the prequel to Rogue One to some degree. But
I think everyone was excited about Rogue One coming out because it's the first very unique Star Wars, as in it's a spin-off. I know they don't like to use that word for some reason.
A Star Wars story.
Yeah. So I found myself picking up Catalyst just so I could have that extra information before the movie. So I think that might be the reason.
Yeah, I think you're right. But anyway, tangent from why we love reading villains.
Yeah, so overall, it sounds like you guys do enjoy getting the perspective from the villain side of things. Does it make you sympathize with them, though? Like, in a character like Vader, where he is just evil, I mean, there's not too much to sympathize with, right, Corey?
Yeah, I don't know. I can't really get on the same side as Vader. I never really have been. Like, I've... Which I think is true to his character. Vader is an evil, powerful, scary villain, which is what he's going for. Like it doesn't matter what his motives are; he's going to cut you in half with a lightsaber.
Which makes his redemption that much more powerful. Actually, right?
Exactly.
For all the books that are villain based, they seem to follow a couple of different patterns. One, the villain maintains the evil. Tarkin is unbelievably evil.
Oh yeah.
And one of the last things he does in the novel Tarkin is unbelievably evil, and it's ancient and gross and brutal, like on his original planet, the sort of ultimate fate he has for one of his enemies. And then they do the Battlefront 2 route where it's like, well, I mean, I am a bad guy. I'm responsible for a lot of deaths as an Imperial, but now I'm a good guy.
Yeah.
Because they just do that a lot. There's a lot of like switching sides. So the book where the villains stay a villain, which is why I think the book Phasma is so powerful, because she is unmitigated evil, and I love her more than I ever have because of Delilah Dawson's book. I like books about villains when they explore the evil. I don't sympathize. I don't empathize. I'm not like, oh, cool, I'm in the driver's seat of being a demon. but I like the exploration of it. Like one of my favorite villains is Hannibal Lecter. I love those books, but I'm not like, ooh, serial killer. That seems awesome.
Yeah. Which is actually a good point. I think people tend to like the villains in general. I know that every time there's been a Star Wars game in which you've been able to choose like an Empire or a good guy versus bad guy type of thing, the bad guys always have an enormous majority player base, which was one of the big problems with the Old Republic MMO game. Is that there were too many.
They tend to look cooler.
Yeah, that's true. Their powers are always better.
Yeah.
All right, well, cool. I do want to mention a few people who have dropped comments, guys, in case y'all are not keeping an eye. Meg is here with us. We all know Meg. She's part of the team.
Hi, Meg.
Connor Egbert, hey, buddy. Michael Straight was here. He had to dip out, but thanks for joining us, Michael. Ian Page just joined us as well. David Allen and Dylan Sasser. So Dylan, you said you just started alliances. Run very far away from this.
So many spoilers.
But do come back and check it out. So thank you guys for commenting, and you will all be entered for a chance to win some Youtini merch that we will announce at the end of this stream. So let's kind of get into the end of the book. We talked a little bit about how maybe things got slow in certain spots, but towards the end we get the big reveal. So Dylan, I hope you're not listening anymore.
Turn it off.
Drum roll, please. That basically the Grisks were stealing Force-sensitive Chiss children in order to navigate basically areas of the unknown regions where there were unstable hyperspace lanes. Okay, that sounded like a mouthful.
It's because it was a mouthful.
It was a mouthful. What did you guys? I mean, what was the first thing that came to mind when you found out they were Chiss? Because I mean, I don't know if there was a way to figure it out beforehand, but I didn't. I was shocked that that's where they went with it. What happened for you guys when you read that?
I'll take a step back and say I wasn't expecting kids or Force sensitive or people at all. I don't know what I was expecting. Like, honestly, I was a little confused by the whole situation, and some of it is I tend to speed read almost when I read pleasure books, and I often, like, if I get sort of mentally bored with a paragraph, I find myself last sentence, and I kind of do that to some degree with Star Wars books, especially because I've read so many of them. Like, it's easy to do that. And so I didn't know if I was just stupid and confused because I had been reading it improperly, or if it was an actually convoluted plot. I think it was the latter.
Sure. Heather, what did you think when you first read those sentences or those passages?
I was really shocked. Like Corey, I didn't quite know what to expect. So, I mean, when you see that they're just children, my first thought was, oh, that's why Thrawn is the one who's here. I would think that Palpatine knew that they were Chiss, and that's why he purposely sent Thrawn. But one thing that I thought was really, really interesting was the fact that they are extremely Force sensitive when they're children, but then they slowly lose that ability once they get older. And I haven't read that many Legends novels, but I haven't heard that before. So I thought that was really interesting. And the fact that they were all female, I know they didn't quite explain why that is.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that.
Thrawn.
Yeah. Does anyone know why that is?
Thrawn himself says they don't know why.
Yeah, that's true. And I believe there was also a hint as to Thrawn possibly being Force sensitive in the past.
Yes. So I actually pulled that passage here on page 270 for those of y'all following along. It says when Thrawn was referring to the Force sensitive Chiss, he says, the sacrifice, most make it willingly for the sake of the ascendancy, but all with the ability must make it. For a moment, his eyes seemed to unfocus as if facing unpleasant thoughts and memories. Then his mind came back. I mean, without saying it,
totally
they said it, right? Was Thrawn Force sensitive? What do you guys think about that?
Well, I thought it said they had to be all female. Is that not true?
It said they're most commonly are female.
Oh, That's interesting. That's interesting. Maybe I almost wonder if it's maybe a step further than himself. Maybe it's a daughter or a sibling or something of that nature.
A
Yeah.
girlfriend.
I certainly hope it's not Thrawn himself.
Yeah, me too.
Because then that sort of throws
Agreed.
open the door for, well, he's really not that smart. He's just seeing the blaster bolts coming to the chest.
Yes.
It's
Yeah.
like,
But
no,
if he
Thrawn
doesn't
is
have
really
that
smart.
ability anymore, I mean, well, I guess he could have retained all of that information while he was force sensitive and just held on to it when he got older.
If the Force opened up that ability in him and he doesn't actually call on the Force to be so smart, then I'm okay with that, I guess. But
Oh yeah.
I
Yeah, if
figure
he
just
starts
let's
seeing
leave Thrawn
seeing
in
blaster
limbo.
bolts and stuff, I'm gonna lose my crap because that's just gonna.
Yeah, I don't think Zahn will let that happen.
The
Zahn will
way I
take care
took
of
it was
his
that
baby.
he was force sensitive as a child and probably outgrew it, and now he doesn't have it anymore. But that's still, for me, I'm not gonna say it takes away from his character, but I will say that I want to have characters that I really like and that I feel like are still really caught up and have their actions have consequences. I want those characters to not all have to be force sensitive.
Yes.
Right. Like I want the everyday person to be able to have an effect on the story as well. Kate, what did you think about these Chiss children, these force sensitives, third sighters, I think is what they were called.
Skywalkers.
Actually, Skywalkers.
That's what it
that's right.
was.
They have the third sight and they are Skywalkers. What did you guys think about that?
I actually laughed out loud when he said that Thrawn had that smirk because he knew it was just too much.
Yeah, I got it. It felt forced to me because they're not even skywalking, right? They're spacewalking. So why are they called Skywalkers? Because they only do that in hyperspace.
But
that's
I totally interrupted Kate. I didn't mean to.
No, it's fine. I think when I got to that point in the book, I was super excited just because I was like, yes, finally, we get to talk about Chiss more, but then it kind of dwindled down, and so, but how it arrived at the Chiss children, I was totally lost.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know that you necessarily could have followed the breadcrumbs on that. It was very much.
Yeah, that was weird.
Yeah,
we don't know a lot about the Chiss in general, which is an important point to make. And
yeah,
I don't know. I thought it was very interesting that Thrawn sort of alluded to some sort of sick social outcasting procedure for after kids are done being force sensitive or something. Did you guys kind of catch that? Did it seem like that to you? It felt like they sort of just disposed of them when they were done with him to some degree. I don't know. Maybe I read that wrong. But
I definitely did not get that. But
okay, maybe I'm an idiot. I sped read that.
But I mean, it very much is. I mean, I think it's in there a bit inherently, Corey, just to answer that question, because it's using these children, right, sometimes against their will,
sure,
while they have this ability, and then we don't need you anymore.
Sure, which is very interesting because Thrawn kind of makes it seem like the Chiss people in general sort of take this moral high ground sort of route to things. So, if that's true, if they just sort of, take these force sensitive kids and just they don't care about them after they're done being force sensitive, then that's a very interesting sort of line of thinking about the Chiss in general.
Yeah, don't challenge the Chiss on their morals, though. They have the high ground.
Yeah.
So one thing that kind of goes back to something I was saying about wanting an everyday character, right? It's hard not to compare this book, Thrawn Alliances, to the original Thrawn. And one thing that was kind of missing in this story, or rather who was missing in this story, was Eli Vanto.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
He was the character from Thrawn who I think, I know I certainly enjoyed. I won't speak for everyone, but he served as that everyday common man, the cadet who just kind of accidentally came along for this ride with Thrawn. And he was the character that you could most easily relate to and kind of almost feel like you were rising in the Imperial ranks along with Thrawn. He's not in this story because we know he's up to something or other involving the Chiss. But did you guys miss having a character like that? And what did Eli Vanto bring that you think would have been nice to have in Thrawn Alliances? Rick, how about we start with you this time?
I didn't miss him, and in fact, given what this story was going to be about, I didn't expect to see him. because obviously he is physically with the Ascendancy. Aralani found him at the end of Thrawn. So I think whatever he's up to, I don't even imagine we'll find out what that is in the timeline that these books take place. I think that'll be later, because sort of tangentially, we know that the First Order had an encounter with some craziness in the unknown regions. It's either the Chiss or the Grisks at this point. That's a whole other discussion. I thought that in the present day storyline, we didn't need an Eli Vanto because Thrawn was so much a part of the Imperial infrastructure. I think Vader was supposed to be that, but I don't think it was intended that it would undermine Vader so much. Like we've said, it's like, why didn't Vader be Vader? Vader, I think, was supposed to be our conduit for Thrawn in that timeline. But I thought Anakin filled that role quite well in the prequel era story. The sort of dealing with how kind of obnoxiously particular and potent Thrawn's intellect is, like the back and forth about Mithra Naruto and how to pronounce it. It's like, without even knowing each other, Thrawn asserts how smart and particular Thrawn is. I thought Anakin supplied that. I enjoyed Anakin interacting with him in the prequel era quite a bit, and it was fresh. Like if it was Eli again, even if Eli were in this story and he took up the same place in the story, I think it would do a disservice to his character, because he grew to be a certain way in Thrawn, and for him to still be questioning and pulling on Thrawn's sleeve like, hey man, you can't do that, it'd be weird at this point.
Yeah, it's a good point.
I'm glad he wasn't around.
Yeah, fair enough.
I did miss him though. I liked him a lot.
Yeah.
The Everyday Man is one of my favorite storytelling devices. I really like to see that in books. It's been done in a lot of books. He was my favorite character in the Thrawn book, also, and it's probably a large reason of why that book was so famous. I mean, he is Watson. Like Thrawn is Sherlock Holmes and Eli is Watson. I mean, that's
100%.
That's the dynamic of their character and their characters, and that's what makes their storytelling so good. Is there's sort of that give and take between them.
Absolutely. Heather, did you miss Eli Vanto? Did maybe some of the other characters serve that role for you?
Yeah, I really did like Eli. I especially felt for him because, he had his own plan and he kind of like got roped into this whole thing. But I also like how in time he started to understand Thrawn and respect him more. And I think that made him an interesting character. And in Thrawn Alliances, I think that, not so much, but I think he was kind of replaced by, there's this one lady, her name is escaping me, but she was with Thrawn on the ship during
Commander
Kara. Thrawn kept asking her, like, well, what do you think? What do you take from this? And kind of like Eli, she would piece things together just by seeing how, Thrawn would do his thing. She started thinking similarly. So that's kind of like what I got from it. She's the new Eli in this book.
Mm-hmm.
Caitlin, you have mentioned several times that you loved Eli in the Thrawn book.
Yes, and like everyone, he was like one of my favorite characters, but I think he was one of my favorite characters because he helped me understand Thrawn.
That's a good point.
And so now that this is the second book, like we kind of know who Thrawn is. So I kind of knew what to expect. I knew how his mannerisms were. So I felt like a character like that wasn't needed.
Yeah,
fair enough.
That actually raises, talking about Eli as he's sort of a secondary character, kind of raises an interesting thought, which I don't know if you were going with this next, Charles, but what did you guys think about the whole sort of stormtrooper side plot with that? I don't remember, what was that guy's name?
Kimmond.
Yeah, that was an interesting sort of weird side plot that seemed partially unnecessary, and they really threw in the I've never been able to pronounce this correctly, the Nagiri. How do you say that?
Nogri, I think.
Nogri. Yeah, I've always said something like Nagiri in my head when I read these. But...
Nagiri sounds good.
Yeah.
I thought that was pretty interesting, and I believe they were, what were they called? The First Legion? Was it First Legion?
Something like that.
Some numbered legion that was basically the elite of the 501st that Vader was still using.
Right.
I enjoyed it actually, and I partly enjoyed it because of the Rook stuff that you're mentioning, Corey. It was good to see him back.
Yeah, I in general really like soldier stuff, particularly like troopers and you know, I've always been a big like I really enjoy World War II stuff and things of that nature anyway. And Band of Brothers is my favorite series of all time. I've binge watched it like 10 times. Last week at most recent time, but I really love all that sort of brotherly sort of stuff that we see between troopers, which is why the Clone Commando series from Legends is absolutely one of my favorite series. That I don't think any I know Rick's read them, but I don't know if you other three guys have read those series. But
I
they are
haven't.
fantastic. The Commander series is super good. Karen Travis is an incredible writer and does some. She really progressed like the Mandalorian culture. I think more so than any other author did in all of Legends. And I really like to see that type of stuff. I felt like we got just a little bit of glimpse in this book. Although like a lot of the weird side plots in this book, it did feel distracting to some degree. But you know, I don't want to complain too much. I like the storylines in general, but I don't think it fit too well with the story.
Yeah.
It's that issue of real estate. I mean, in a book
Yeah.
that's this brief, it's like I just every time it wasn't Vader or Thrawn or Anakin and Thrawn, I just wanted to go back. I wanted Padme to be there with them. I wanted whatever was going on to be involved with them only.
Yeah.
Especially having been accustomed to how the first Thrawn book was told, you either were with Arinda or Eli and Thrawn, if I recall correctly. It was very streamlined, and the bulk of it was with Thrawn. And Arinda meets up with Thrawn pretty quickly in the story after her adventures on Coruscant, politicking. So for me, I just wanted Thrawn to be the forefront. And every time we got away from that, I felt that's where the story got weak, you know, because
Sure.
I had no prior investment. I had like even the stuff with Rook bothered me because I have not watched Rebels. Pull
Oh
my fan
yeah.
card.
Oh yeah. I
But I'm
forgot
like,
that that's
I'm like,
that's
when
where
did
he
he
was
show
sort of
up?
personalized.
Like I know Rook because I've read all the Thrawn books, but it's not the
Yeah.
same Rook. Everyone seems annoyed like he's this weird gremlin. I was like, I don't
Yeah,
Are
the
know
the
where he came
Clone
from.
Wars picture or the character they presented was not at all how I pictured him back when I first read
yeah,
the Thrawn
me either.
trilogy.
And
Yeah,
now
the Noghri were
are
scary
the
in the Thrawn trilogy.
Are the Noghri? Is that the same bodyguards that Princess Leia sort
Yeah,
of has? Okay, I was
yeah, Lady Vader.
I couldn't remember that if that was a thing or not. That was yeah, they were not how I picked them, but I don't know. That happens a lot. Whenever you read books and then you see something on screen, you know your impression of that entity changes, and it's hard
Sure.
not to it's not hard to have your feelings hurt with those sorts of things. It's easy to see why people get so frustrated when The Last Jedi is not what they want it to be and things of that nature when they have so many preconceived expectations. But you know,
Right. Right. Um, Now, I do want to talk a little bit more about surprise, surprise, Vader and Thrawn and the dynamic between them. Um, a lot of this story really focused on trust. Heather, you alluded to this earlier, so I'm going to come to you first with this question. It had to do with trust. It had to do with people having a common goal for different reasons, right? So in the Clone Wars timeline, Anakin wanted to destroy that droid factory to save Padme. Thrawn wanted to get in there to get the shield generator technology for the Chiss. And then in the Empire timeline, Vader wanted to destroy the Grisks because they were a threat to the Empire. And we're not really sure if that's why Thrawn was doing it or if it was because they had the Force sensitive Chiss children that we talked about. So at the end of all of that, do you guys think that Vader actually trusts Thrawn? Does he grow to trust Thrawn at all? If totally or just to a degree? Heather, you first.
Oh, that is a hard question.
It is.
Because clearly throughout the story, Vader had a problem with Thrawn not telling him the details. But I think toward the end, I think there's a little passage in there that says something about, after the whole thing blew over, Vader said something about learning to trust him, didn't he? It's kind of escaping me, but I thought he said something similar to that.
I
But
don't have a quote for this one.
yeah, and I
Corey's
think
looking.
I know Vader is a different person, but he still has his memories with Anakin.
Mm.
I think based on his mission with Thrawn during the past, I think kind of helped too. Seeing everything come together a second time, working with Thrawn, I think he finally realized, like, hey, I think this guy does know what he's doing.
Yeah, Okay. All right. Kate, does Vader trust Thrawn?
Like Heather said, that's a hard question. But I think he does towards the end, but I almost don't want it because they're so different. And because to me they're like a fire and ice duo. So it's hard. I don't know.
Okay, fair enough. You don't have to know.
Does he trust Thrawn? I don't think so. But does he have a different level of respect for him at this point? I think so. I was just looking. The very last pages talk about is Thrawn sort of figures out that he sort of makes the connection that it's definitely Anakin, and he sort of tests him one last time, and Vader tells him to basically drop it. And then Vader turns and talks about the ship that Thrawn has been obsessed with for a while now, that TIE fighter sort of prototype, and says how great it is. And I don't know. I don't think you trust him. It's a difficult question. Does Vader trust anybody? That might be a good important question to ask.
I was just going to say
I
that
think you put it a good way, though. Maybe it's not trust. Maybe it's just a different level of respect.
Yeah.
Okay, fair enough. Rick, what are your thoughts on that?
Just briefly, I feel like Vader trusts only one person, himself, and maybe the Emperor. But I think he fears the Emperor, like in the God-fearing sense.
Yeah.
The Emperor is an omnipresent power in his life, so it's like the only person Vader trusts is Vader. I think he learns to tolerate Thrawn, and I think he learns to accept what Thrawn does, because Thrawn is really, really frustrating to anybody who can't keep up is left behind in the dust. Vader can, and he doesn't see any reason for all of this sort of, Thrawn goes through these motions, and he's constantly telling Vader to wait a moment. And how many people are like, a moment?
Right. Yeah, to Vader of all
It was
people.
annoying to read, and I think Vader at least knows Thrawn is the real deal. And if Vader's relationship with the Emperor is in question at all, Thrawn would be a terrible way to upset it. So I think, as much as I hated seeing Vader restrain himself in ways that I didn't believe, I guess I do buy that his uncertainty about Thrawn would have him just fiddling with his lightsaber rather than. So now I don't think he trusts him. I don't think that's what it's about. I don't think he has to. I mean, he just trusts the Emperor's will, possibly.
Okay, absolutely. And now let's kind of flip that on its head. In this novel, Thrawn really was able to reconcile the goals of the Chiss and the goals of the Emperor, or the Empire, rather, throughout the whole thing, really. There was never a time when he wasn't able to explain his actions to Vader. And he said on several occasions, I don't have to choose a side. I can do something that is going to benefit both sides. But ultimately, if it came down to it, would Thrawn side with the Chiss, or would he side with the Empire, in y'all's opinion?
Can we, before we answer that, can we briefly sort of recap exactly what happened in the end of this book? Because it's still a little bit vague. It's still a little bit vague to me. So there was this. What was up with the whole Chiss courier ship? Can you guys recap that a bit? It's been a month or two since I read this.
I'll take a whack at it. It sounds as if there was essentially a Chiss civil war, if you will, where the ascendancy has been split.
Right.
Some of the Chiss were pro Grisk, or were okay with working with the Grisks, and others would not have been. And so that's what the courier ship was Chiss, who we got Ray making an appearance over here.
She kept whining.
So the courier ship was the Chiss who would have been pro Grisk. And so I think that Thrawn might be viewing those Chiss as a threat to the ascendancy as he knew it. So I think his point was that he could basically destroy the Grisk and help both sides.
Yeah. Okay.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, that's kind of what that's what I pretty much thought too. But I just wanted to be sure about that. Yeah, I don't know. Is that Thrawn rationalizing?
Probably.
There's a lot of that going around.
Yeah, Thrawn does make it clear upon his first meeting with the Emperor, and I'm definitely paraphrasing. I mean, the Emperor says, "Well, if your loyalties are to me, are they to me?" And without saying so directly, Thrawn's like, "Well, yeah, but also to the Chiss. I feel like you're saying I'll figure it out." Like, Thrawn knows that Thrawn is smart enough to play a really long game. I don't think he knows so far into the future that he knew how he would juggle all of it, but I feel like he can always, I think, I don't know, was it Charles or Corey that said it, he makes the results land for both sides of the equation, so that neither the galaxy or the Empire knows much about the Chiss and vice versa.
Sure.
You know,
I think you know the point that you made about Vader, and that Vader cares about one person, he cares about Vader. I think to some degree that probably applies to Thrawn in some nature. I mean, he sort of portrays himself as this very altruistic person that's going to choose the best answer regardless of who it's for. But like, I think in the reality, especially the way he sort of behaved at the end of this book, it made it seem like he would choose the most logical answer, not necessarily not necessarily the side that it plays on. I mean, he seems to be able to recognize that the Chiss have got some issues, and that he's not really afraid to admit that.
If the characterization of Thrawn is the same, like, because I know that, you know, Legends and canon are separate, but spoilers, one of the last thing that Thrawn says is that it was so artfully done. I mean, I think he's a bit in love with his own machinations. He's very much not only capable of it, but aware of how awesome he is. So I think that he likes to play that game too. So I think you're correct. I think Thrawn, he, regardless of how it shook out, he would use his brain power to come up with the best, because he is the smartest. He would do the smartest thing for everybody.
Sure.
It doesn't have to serve him, really.
Yeah. And this next question is for Ray. Ray, what? No, I'm just kidding. Kate, what do you think? Would Thrawn ultimately side with the Chiss or Vader, or will he sit the fence until he has died?
Caitlin, we lost your mic.
Yeah, we lost some audio, so let's give her a second. And Heather, why don't you tell me your thoughts? Do you think Thrawn will side with the Chiss or the Empire ultimately?
Well, when you first asked that, I was thinking that he would side with the Chiss, because my impression on that in the first book was he kind of like joined the Empire to use their resources in order to help the Chiss, because obviously he was with the Chiss first. I think that's his first priority. But, you know, it kind of makes sense for him to make the more logical choice. Like, I don't think he would lose and sacrifice himself to help the Chiss. He would probably do whichever one would help him in the long run.
Okay, so he's kind of out for himself, is what I'm hearing from several of y'all. Kate, you got the audio back?
Maybe.
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
We got you. What do you think?
I don't know. I want him to side with the Chiss because that's where he came from, but I think his whole logic is what governs him. So I don't think he's really on a side.
Okay, fair enough. So that kind of brings me to the tagline for this book that was really intriguing when it kind of first came out, right? And that is that time for Thrawn to face his future, time for Vader to face his past. Maybe you guys can help me with this one. Yeah, Rick's got it there. Maybe you guys can help me with this one. I felt it was painfully obvious that, or how I should say, Vader was facing his past. Not so much how, in case you guys don't have the book, you can get a close-up look at it there. It wasn't painfully obvious for me how Thrawn was facing his future. I didn't know if that was a reference to him in the early timeline and seeing the Empire, which was going to be a big part of his future, or whether that was talking about that kind of confusing ending. How did Thrawn face his future?
Did he? I don't think he did.
Foundational answer, or do you want the cynical answer?
I want both. I want Rick. That's what I
want. I think a line like that looks really good in a tweet.
Yeah,
and I think it's really good for marketing. And I do not think that the book touched on that.
Agreed.
Vader was not forced to reflect on his past. He did not ruminate over Padme. He didn't think about the younglings. It had nothing to do with his past. And Thrawn didn't face his future. The book takes place in his present. So
Yeah.
for me, I don't.
Star Wars.
It's cool, but it's not. I feel like Tim Zahn was like, "That's not what my book is about, guys.
Right.
What are you doing?"
Right. Which, if you hear Tim Zahn talk about anything, he definitely comes across like that too. And like, I don't know, man. Star Wars is the game of managing expectations. Like, it seriously is. Like, especially with all of us, with such diehard fans that know as much as we do. Like, it is so hard to manage your expectations properly. When we heard that there was going to be a Thrawn and Vader book, and then this tagline came out, then we saw the cover, like, maybe that's part of the problem, is we were all just sort of, expecting something totally different, and that wasn't the story that wasn't the story that Zahn wanted to tell. The same way that we hear that Lucas used to say that all the time. That's not the story I wanted to tell. It's this. That's just not the story that he was trying to tell. Is that it's what else? Where's this series going? Is really my question. Is this going to be 3 books? Have they announced that? Like, is it going to be 5 books? Like, it seems like the story group is pretty wishy-washy about announcing continuations of series and things like that, which is kind of odd. But we don't have any idea where this is going to go. Like, is this going to tie into the Rebels finale, which I don't want to spoil because that's still relatively new, and I don't know.
I would like to think that Zahn is going to get to play in the post Return of the Jedi playground again. I feel like this is all going back to giving him a reason to re-explore that stuff, because my memory is really hazy, but the original Thrawn trilogy, Thrawn came into the story, and the reason why you hadn't heard about him much before is because he was dealing with something way far away in the galaxy. He was away. Because like, where was Thrawn during the Galactic Civil War in the original books? He wasn't around. I forget. And
I can't
someone's
remember.
probably going to like.
Caitlin, you've read those most recently. You could probably answer that.
I think it was something on the outskirts. It wasn't clear, but
he gets to come back and sort of help the Imperial Remnant. That's what it was called, the Remnant, survive. So I feel like Zahn's going to get to redo that the same way he did with Thrawn, which I look forward to, because there are a lot of indications that the Grisks are analogs for the Yuuzhan Vong in certain ways.
Yeah, I got that too.
They don't have to be the Yuuzhan Vong. I don't need the exact thing.
I hope they're not.
But to back up a little bit, Corey, I do want to say that I don't often get stuck on the hype train, but I got super duper hype train on this book. I was like, choo choo, and I was so excited because at the beginning of Thrawn, they tease this adventure. They tease whatever this meeting was, and it affects the Emperor so deeply. I thought, oh my God, this got to be profound. But then I have to remember that truly profound stuff is in the movies. It's not even in the cartoons. So I should have tempered my expectations, and they did get the best of me. And it was unfortunate because the book lost steam for me about halfway through. And in preparation for today, I finally finished it up. And the back half of it was really awesome. Yeah, I wish I had stuck with it.
Well, that's classic Zahn style too, is to sort of him and Lucena sort of share that trait, and that they sort of wrap things up about 3/4 way through, and the story starts to really come together. And I mean, how can you not? How can you not have high expectation? This is Zahn. This is Thrawn. These are some of the most loved characters. One of the arguably the most famous author in all of the Star Wars EU. I mean, Timothy Zahn is probably credited with a lot of our introduction to Star Wars books, period. I mean, and people in general. Yeah. So
I maintain that he kept Star Wars alive.
Oh, 100%. I mean, he was the first author to really shoot Star Wars books to the bestseller list. I mean, he's got a fantastic history. When they announced the Thrawn book, when I had it, I have a beautiful tweet long before I started Youtini. Not a tweet, an Instagram post, a beautiful Instagram post that I put a lot of thought into writing about Zahn. I really researched his history, and he's got a fantastic story. I mean, he started like we did. He was a big nerd and decided to write what was at the time basically fan fiction, and it shot to the New York Times bestseller list. It stayed there for weeks, and it really put Star Wars on the map. And without Zahn, we might not have the expanded universe that we have today. So, yeah, manage those expectations real fast, guys.
I honestly don't even think we'd have the prequel films. I mean, I know they're always on the back burner, but the original Thrawn trilogy sold millions and millions and millions of copies.
Oh yeah, and it still does too. It sells out. I have to order. I have like a baseline book quantity of books that we have to keep on hand for our inventory, and I have to keep like 12 of the entire Thrawn trilogy on hand, because literally every single month people want that book and want those 3 books because they're so good, and they have so much like fundamental importance to the entire expanded universe.
Yeah, they were episode 7, 8, 9 for a lot of people for a very long time.
Absolutely. And that's something interesting point that you were bringing up there, Corey, about how it's our expectations that maybe are hurting us in the end. I think it's an interesting thought experiment to think about, what if they just dropped this book with absolutely no hype, no one knew it was coming, and you read it without those expectations. Honestly, you could make the same argument for the movies. If Last Jedi had just dropped and no one even knew that there was a Star Wars movie in the making, I think there would be more favorable general consensus.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right.
And so you guys kind of touched on this already, but I do want to hear from everyone. Do you want a sequel to this? Do you want this to be a trilogy? Do you want more Thrawn? Do you need to see this story finished? Kate, how about you? Let's start with you.
I definitely want to see more Thrawn. I think he's like my favorite character. He was like one of the first books that I read. So he really got me started into the EU.
Absolutely. And Heather, what about you? Do you want another Thrawn novel?
Yeah, I would want a Thrawn novel if I guess the plot was more centered and there was a clearer goal. Yeah, I would like to see that.
Okay. Rick?
If this book takes place between seasons 3 and 4 of Rebels, as I understand it to be, I don't know what a third book would be in this timeline, because he's got a pretty definitive end point that hasn't been resolved because of Rebels.
Sure.
I have to imagine with Rebels now being canceled, the next Thrawn book has got to be later. It's got to be much later, or with whatever he's done. I mean, I definitely want more, because I think, I mean, I don't know if there's any more hardcore of a fan than one who's read hundreds of books along with me. Like I've said that before to you guys, and I always want more. The biggest gift in the world is not only liking Star Wars and the movies majority being really good, but having endless stories for me to dive into. Good ones, bad ones, excellent ones. I love it. Give me absolutely more. So yeah, I want a sequel. I just don't know if it fits in this timeline. If it's before the end of Rebels, how consequential could it be? That worries me. You know, Thrawn felt consequential because it was him establishing himself within the Empire.
Mm-hmm.
This book feels quasi-consequential. I know the books can't ultimately be definitive, you know, because the movies are always the most important. But whatever a sequel would be, you know, I feel like we're getting to the tap dancing portion. It's either going to have to be something really big.
Speaking of the timeline, how would you feel about the next book, say, being about like Thrawn and Ezra working together to get out of whatever situation they ended up in?
I would love that. That's kind of what I'm hoping for. That would be ideal.
Yeah. We need to figure out how that Rebels ending is going to wrap up. They have to wrap it up one way or another, and I think a book would be a great place to do that. Corey, is that something you want to see?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I mean, you guys have heard my thoughts on the Rebels TV show. I have sort of mixed feelings about it. It didn't speak to me the way that Clone Wars did. Yeah, I think you know, to echo Rick's point, I always want more Star Wars, man. Like gimme. Like, I don't care what it is, whether it's good, bad. I'm gonna read it and I'm gonna enjoy it. And I mean, I think I gave this book higher than the rest of you guys did, and I think I gave it 7.5. And I mean, I enjoy reading Star Wars. It's my way to escape from reality of my hellacious medical school life. So yes, I absolutely want more Thrawn. I would like to see. Is this technically a series? I don't know that it is. I mean, they seem so disconnected, like at this point, that like this had nothing to do with the last book. I mean, it only casually mentioned Eli like once or twice. So like, I don't think it really seems to be a real true series per se. It seems just to be Thrawn's story, like as it fits into the the grand story and however the authors and the story group sees fit. So I mean, I'm fine with it. I want to see more Thrawn. I love him as a character. I hope they're able to properly restore some of his credibility, if that's the right word, as the sort of Sherlock Holmes character. I think that Rebels undermined that a little bit, which is one of my big issues with that show. I think that this book sort of undermined that a little bit. And that's not the way we see him in the Legends books and in the previous Thrawn book. Even this book stood out as the one sort of black sheep of all the different Thrawn stuff we have, because we do have the Thrawn duology that it's not really about. It doesn't have Thrawn in it really, but it's kind of still about Thrawn.
Hand of Thrawn.
Yeah, the Hand of Thrawn duology. So I mean, we've got a lot of Thrawn, man. He's been around for a long time, and he's a very well developed character. I would absolutely want more, but I think I will say, and I'm pretty sure everyone will agree that it needs to be done right, and not that this book was not done right, because it was done well. But I think all of us can agree we would like to see that sort of original portrayal of Thrawn in a little more light to keep from
Yeah.
being that one guy that just always wants what they used to have.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm pretty much in agreement with all of you. I want more, specifically more Thrawn. I want more Eli Vance doing with the Chiss. I want to see that come into play. Maybe he's the inside man who gets back in touch with Thrawn and tells him about this civil war and whatever's going on with the Ascendancy. I think there's a lot of really good material there that I'd be excited to see. Now, we've been going for a good while now, guys. So what I'd like to do is just go back around, give me your final thoughts, final analysis on Thrawn Alliances, and let's revisit that 1 to 10 rating that you gave it at the beginning of the talk. See if it changed, and if it has changed, let me know why. So let's try and do that in the same order that we opened. Corey, I believe you started.
Yeah, I think I will definitely stick to my original rating of 7.5. I rarely give a Star Wars book lower than, say, like a 7 is about the minimum I would give most Star Wars books that I've read. I enjoy most of them except for I Jedi. That book sucked, but we won't talk about that. I like it. I'll give it a hard 7.5. Will I read this book again? That's really the ultimate test for me, because I don't really reread Star Wars books very often, because I have so much untouched material. And I will probably say no. I will not probably read this book again for a really long time, if that speaks anything about it. But I enjoyed it. I liked the book. I would, if I knew everything that I knew, would I still pick it up? Probably.
Okay. Rick, let's go to you next.
So I still stick with 7. For me, while the parts of the book I liked were great, there were huge parts, just literally physically parts of this book that had nothing to do with the main story, and it was too much of it.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, as a complete story, it's a little weak, but a lot of the content was really good. And as we've talked about some of the things and the interactions between the characters, I think I do feel a little more positively about it.
For sure.
But for the most part, I don't think it overcomes its structural problems. For me, the sort of death knell of any book is when I want to stop. And I did put this book down for about 3 weeks. I just stopped. I was like, I don't want to read about Padme in this context. So I give it a 7 because I can't deny that it's written well. I mean, Zahn is a brilliant Star Wars writer. So much of the language of Star Wars literature is Zahn. I think the characterization of Padme once she's with Anakin and exhibiting all the agency that she has is great. So I do like her inclusion. I think Anakin Skywalker is awesome. And I know we didn't get a chance to get into this. I wanted to, but I heard Hayden. I did not hear Matt Lanter from the Clone Wars. I felt like this was episode 2 and 3 Anakin. And I liked that because I'm so fond of those movies and they get so much hate. His wooden stickman performance being what it was. I always liked it. So there's a lot to recommend the book. And I mean, 7 is good. 7 out of 10 is a pretty high rating. It's not up there,
Anything over 7 on IMDb is worth watching.
Yeah. They're all in the top 200 at that point.
I know.
I mean, of all the new canon, if we're talking about just those, very few of those are above a 7 or an 8 for me anyway.
Yeah.
Maybe an action, none of them. Even though I like a lot of them. So I'm just being honest in my number, but I mean, I liked it. Again, obviously we're all super biased. We literally are a part of a Star Wars company that, loves Star Wars books. So it's I give it a 20 or a 7. I guess that's sort
of Sure. All right. Heather, what's your rating and what are your final thoughts?
I am going to stick with 6. It was just pretty average for me. I didn't quite hate it, but it didn't completely blow me away. Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much the best way I can put this novel. In my opinion, it was just straight up average 6.
Okay. And Kate, what about you?
I think I would probably go with a 7 now that I've talked about it. I think the expectation thing hit me really hard after I finished this book because I was expecting so much Thrawn, and to me this wasn't a book about Thrawn as much as it was about Anakin and Vader. So to but as an overall book in the Star Wars universe, I think it's actually pretty good.
Yeah. All right, great. And I'm gonna bump my score up to a 6.5. Really because talking about it a little bit more made me think more about I really did enjoy the ending. I just felt like we could have gotten there in a cleaner, slightly more interesting way. Had you been able to kind of follow small hints throughout the book that kind of got you to the conclusion, more like a Sherlock Holmes, I think I would have enjoyed that. A bit more, but I'm gonna go 6.5. So guys, this has been a whole lot of fun. Thank you so much, everyone, for being available with different schedules in different parts of the U.S. To make this first Youtini Roundtable a success in my eyes, and a whole lot of fun besides that.
Yeah,
Hopefully
absolutely.
we're doing this for solo.
Yeah, definitely got to do this for
Oh,
solo.
yeah.
I'm excited to dive into another film novelization.
Yes. We did get a couple more comments.
So that I just have to mention it because I was laughing so hard at this part. Did anyone notice how in the Clone Wars era when Anakin was explaining like how the droids were like in that T shape or whatever, he said sand angels instead of like snow angels? I don't know, that kind of just got to me. I just had to say something about that.
Oh my
Anyways.
god. I didn't get to mention, and we'll do a sidebar maybe on the next roundtable, but Anakin using a corpse with the Force.
Oh my god, how did we not talk about that?
You're right.
It was the most morbid, bizarre thing.
Yes, dude, that's
the
like
worst part about that was that he practiced inside the bar for like 10 minutes to make it lifelike.
God, that was like something straight out of like a Bane book or something.
He just slides off the starship after all that into the forest. Like,
yes, he just left his body there. Like, all right, I'm done now.
Yeah.
And zero empathy from Thrawn and Vader. They're like, well, whatever. I need a dead body puppet. We gotta do this, right? We gotta find Padme. He'll do anything for Padme. I guess I shouldn't be surprised.
Again,
that was. I feel like Zahn was like, I wonder if anyone will notice.
Yes, for sure.
That was weird. That pull. I think I contacted Corey about it. I was like, I couldn't be alone with it. What is this?
Yes, yeah. I forgot about that. You messaged me.
It was pretty messed up. I actually had that in my notes.
It was like grotesque.
Again, that was the Jedi, guys. That was not Anakin. Another one of those just messed up things. From now on, I think in my life, if I ever do something that I'm ashamed or embarrassed of, from now on, I'm gonna be like, that was the guy. Like that wasn't me. We did get a couple more comments, so I do want to give people shout outs because they did take the time. So Steven Ridenauer said that he really wants to get this book. I happen to know a book service, a Star Wars book service that could get that book to your doorstep.
We still have signed copies too. We still have some signed copies. Yeah, in case you guys didn't realize this too, I'm going to show you this right now. I know my camera is tiny, but yeah, the copies are actually signed copies of the books. This is not a book plate; like it's a signed copy of the book, and it says signed edition on it. They're pretty sweet still, and I still have a bunch left. So, like, if you happen to coincidentally order the book, I can still hook you up with a signed copy. I think we sell them for a little bit cheaper than they go for on Amazon too, actually, for the signed edition. So.
Fantastic. And no matter what you think about this book, this is Timothy Zahn, guys.
Yeah, it's worth reading, guys.
It's Timothy Zahn, and to have his signature on one of his novels, that's pretty exciting.
For sure.
So Dylan Sasser also commented, basically saying that he agrees with the hype train, and that was certainly playing into a problem with people's perception of this book. And Meg also commented that basically no matter what Zahn writes, she's going to read it because Zahn. Which we all feel similarly. So this is a Youtini Tuesday video, guys. So we need to close this off. We have a few announcements to make as far as winners go. Heather, I believe you have the winners of our Aurebesh riddle that went out in our last shipment.
Yes. So the Aurebesh riddle, we did have a few people participate, and a lot of people came up with the answer. Corey, would you happen to have like the riddle translated?
Yeah, I could pull that up really fast. Here, let me get to it.
Yeah, maybe if you can recite that before I start.
Oh gosh. Yeah, hold on a second. Let me see if I can find it here. So this is the first one we did, right?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So in basic, if you will, the riddle is: by bullets and blasts, many have fallen, but death cannot stop us. We are the chosen. Connected by blood, we chose our names. It's up to us, the galaxy, to save. We may be mere pawns in a greater battle, but down here is our blood and our sweat that will defeat the rabble. Forged for greatness, we fight for what's right and true. We live as one, a sea of white and black and blue. Who are we? And
Okay, so the answer to that is clone troopers.
yes.
Now, some people got that answer right, and out of those people, I selected a winner at random, and it is Joe Mango, aka JMango72 on Twitter. And so, Joe Mango, you will be getting a free paperback novel of your choice. You can send us a message or we'll reach out to you on which novel you want. But everybody who participated will receive a consolation prize in their next box.
Right.
So that would be Ken Jackson, Dustin Holden, Kylo 10, Ian Page, and Patrick Ortiz. Thank you all for participating. Expect to receive a little extra in your next box.
Fantastic. And congrats to you guys. Like any other Youtini Tuesday video, anyone who commented was entered to win some Youtini merch. Today we are going to be giving away a bookmark pack, and the winner of today's raffle is Steven Ridenauer. So Steven, congrats to you, and we will be getting in contact with you to get that merch to you. All right. That just about wraps things up here. So again, I just want to say how much fun this was, everyone.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks so much for being here, and I can't wait to do some more of these. This was a blast.
For sure. Maybe this is a precursor to the Youtini podcast.
Yes. Yeah, keep your eyes peeled for that.
Coming
All right.
soon.
Corey, do you want to sign us off as our captain?
Absolutely, guys. Thanks for listening. As always, may the force be with you.